And welcome back to our Light Your Fire campaign. Today is the third topic, myth busting, the top 10 lies that we tell ourselves. So we are really excited to talk to you about this. We've had a lot of fun prepping for it and had some really good conversations. So with me today is Grace. She works with me in the Population Health Department at APEC. So Grace, I'll let you do a little bit of an intro.
Yeah, so it's great to be here, Allie. I'm excited. I've been watching the first couple of episodes, so I'm excited. I think this is an awesome, very relevant topic. But my name is Grace Bennett. Like Allie said, I am on the Population Apex, and I'm also a registered dietitian. So I work a lot one-on-one with individuals, talking about, nutrition, of course, but also just anything health and wellness. And if I've learned anything this year, a big topic of conversation is kind of burnout and mental health. So I'm really excited about today's topic. I think it's a really good one. So
yeah,
happy to be here.
Perfect. Good. Well, I'm glad you're here with me. Virtually. As you can tell, we're both in our own houses, but this just seems to be the norm and how it works these days. So first one, we'll start with myth number one. Okay. My employees are burned out. What do you think about that one?
I think this is kind of the perfect one to set the stage. So I think a lot of times, burnout is something that feels very personal, but when we take a step back and kind of look at it objectively, a lot of it has to do, unfortunately, with just little things that happen within the workplace. So I think this is kind of interesting language to try to shift away from. And maybe instead of like putting the ownership of burnout on the employee, it's like, okay, how can we talk about a work environment that just prevents burnout in general, and instead of like taking ownership as the employee?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, obviously burnout can be a personal issue, but a lot of times as an organization, we might fall into the trap of putting all of that responsibility on the employee to say, well, they're going to need some individual tools to help pull them out. But really there are some things that can be done on an organizational level, to kind of help the overall culture, and maybe there are things that we're doing to attribute to the stress or burnout. So I really like starting with this one because it's one of those things that maybe we hear ourselves saying, and all 10 of these things that we'll talk about today are going to be kind of those mental thoughts that you might have that kind of run through your head. And once you hear them, it's like, wait a minute. This is where I need to catch myself, right?
Yeah, it almost takes a kind of a different, almost like a third party point of view to kind of stop that cycle in your head too. And I think I was reading something really interesting, and I think we've all kind of probably experienced it. Typically it's not the huge, it's not huge things that, cause burnout. It's like those little everyday things that we experience as an employee. And so I think, that's not to put blame on either or, but it just is kind of the goal of kind of addressing this myth is to just challenge us all to kind of think more on an organizational larger scale rather than just the personal scale.
Yep. And just like you said, it brings it to the conscious. So It makes us think about it and be able to catch it when either we hear ourselves say it or we're catching someone else do it. I think that's a really good one to start with. And this next one, number 2, is one of my personal favorites because I fall into this trap all the time, and I can hear myself say it, and it's, I'm fine.
Yeah, that's like the chorus of 2020, right? I'm fine. Everything is okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I always laugh too because it's like I say I'm fine, and that just like it's blaring. I am not fine. Right. Like it is 100% the opposite. Red flags. Yeah, red flags.
Yeah, I think that's kind of probably, it's just the easiest answer to give, honestly, and I think that's why we hear it so often. But it's like, and I can understand that because we're just so, we'll talk about this a little later on in the episode, but we're so worried about like giving other people our too much weight. We don't want to be a burden.
Right.
And it's almost just like, I find myself pausing and saying like I'm like, I can't even go there. I'm fine. Like,
yeah, I know. And it's one of those things that like to challenge that myth, like to challenge yourself to answer the question differently, where it does take some vulnerability to be able to really answer someone's question, to say, I'm struggling today. Or, that's a hard answer to give, but I think you and I were talking before, and it's almost like you can play it off in a way of like, I'm fine. Isn't everything fine? Like making a joke about it, to say, like, to lighten the mood and recognize, like, I can say I'm fine, but I'm really not. And maybe we're close enough that we can kind of dive deeper into that. But if not, you can at least let the other person know, like, it's kind of a struggle right now. We might not need to go into all the details, but I'm not going to fake it either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for both sides. It's like beneficial for both sides to answer a little bit more honestly. And it's not, you just kind of, like you said, it's not to say you have to like spill your soul and like what's going on, but it's more of like, it's okay to give an honest answer, because everyone has been there when say they're fine, when they're not. And I almost think it's really beneficial to, be just a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more honest in those answers, because it just kind of sparks a conversation. And it's just like gives you something to relate
it's
to.
Refreshing.
It's just, right.
Yeah.
And it just like, I don't know. I think it's just beneficial for, both people involved in the conversation to know, oh, they're not fine either. Neither am I. Like, let's see what we can do to help each other.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And this next one, I think number 3, kind of goes along. It's like a similar topic or a similar idea, but it's, sure, I can do that. Or yeah, I can do that. Just kind of adding to the plate. So I know you had some good points on this one, just with on the spot answers and how people feel they need to answer.
Yeah. We always fall into the trap of saying yes. Like, it's very hard to say no, or to tell someone that you can't do something, whether it be at work or in your personal life or family, whatever the case is. Like, a lot of people's automatic response is yes. And whether they have the time or capacity or energy to do anything like that. So, instead of automatically pushing yourself to say no, kind of an easier transition out is to say, I don't know, let me get back with you, or I'll check my schedule and get back with you. And I do that a lot. Of sometimes I do need to check my schedule and, see if I have the capacity, but sometimes it's like, I'm too uncomfortable to say no right now. So I need a little bit of space, and then I'll be able to ease my way into it later. But that's also okay to be able to say no. Sometimes that needs to be the answer.
Yeah. And I always think about, when we're kind of afraid to say no, if you kind of flip the coin and say, if you were on the other end of that and someone told you, I really just don't have the capacity right now. I want to make sure this is done right. And I just don't think I can get it done. I think more often than not, people would not be super frustrated by that answer. If I got that answer, I would say, okay, I appreciate the honesty, because we all know that when things aren't done to, kind of the best of someone's ability, or like with the full focus, they have to be redone. It takes longer to get anything, processed or complete. So I think that it is, it's okay to think about if someone told me that, I wouldn't feel super frustrated. I think that can be a helpful way to feel okay with giving that answer. And I really like that, because it's hard to say no in the moment, but, also saying that also kind of prompts you to slow down for a second and maybe look at your capacity where you wouldn't have before.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think I have this conversation with a lot of people that I coach. When it comes to time management and priorities and your goals, time is a very limited resource. We all have the exact same minutes in the day. And really something that I try to talk to people about is, and it's hard to practice. So I'm not perfect at it by any means, but if you're saying yes to somebody else when you really should be saying no, then the person you're saying no to is yourself. Like, there is always a give and a take with any sort of answer you're going to give. So if you're saying yes to somebody else and you're going to give them your time and your energy when you had other things for yourself that was either higher priority at work, higher priority at home, a value, a goal, something that you're working on, that then goes to the back burner. And I think when people make that connection, it's kind of easier to then say no. Like, I'm able to say yes to something else because I'm saying no over here.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
it's not I always like to remind people too, it's not a selfish thing to do that, to say no, to protect your own time and your own kind of mental well-being. And that kind of, I mean, that honestly leads right into our next one, which our next myth, number 4, being more is more. And I think that kind of, you just hit it on the head with the time management, right? I think it's easy to slip into this assumption that the more hours I work, the better employee I am. The more I'm getting done, it's all positive, more. But when we think about the quality of, there comes a certain point where the quality of your work is not there.
Right.
And it kind of goes along that same line of protecting your time outside of work, finding that work-life balance. I think just makes the hours that you are working so much more productive because you're refreshed. You're not burnt out, right?
Yes.
You're not tired or frustrated. And so I think that providing that separation and being intentional about that is not selfish, doesn't make you a bad employee. It likely will do the opposite, make you a better employee, better for other people. Your coworkers.
Yeah. Being more efficient, but then also with that, with the selfish piece, it always then what the word that comes to mind for me is guilt. Like, so that you have to be able to let go of that guilt as well. So if you're saying no, or if you are taking on less or working more efficiently and you see someone else is working all these hours, that doesn't mean that you're not doing your job, that you are less than, or that you should be doing more. And I think we often have that negative response internally. Maybe we don't say it out loud, but I think we all can identify that feeling of guilt, that it's probably not deserved.
Right.
We just kind of put it on ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's for even conversations like this, like even in preparing for this, I know we kind of both were having like very real moments, and hopefully that's kind of what we're giving people today. But it's like, you're totally right. Like, and I think, one way to kind of address that guilt, because we can tell ourselves over and over, don't feel guilty. This is good. But I think maybe focusing even more specifically on, it's almost like walking through the exercise with yourself of saying, okay, I feel really good today at work. Why do I feel like that? Oh, because I went for a walk after work yesterday. I had kind of some separate time. I, prioritized other things in those evening hours, or the kind of those off work hours. And as a result, today I'm so much, better for my
feeling the
benefits. Feeling the benefits.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes naming those specific benefits can even help mitigate some of that guilt, if you will.
Yes, I love it. And I think sometimes when you put a language to it and you say it out loud, or you write it down, or you're at least more aware of it, then it becomes a conscious choice of like, okay, if I'm feeling stressed or if I'm feeling burned out, I have these options. I can either choose to continue be burned out and stay in front of my computer, or if I know these 3 things really do help me feel better, then I have the choice to go do one of those and try to pull myself out of it.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to a client last week, a coaching client, so one-on-one, and she was kind of having that. It's almost like the Zoom fatigue, or just like computer fatigue. And I think, her particular position, she was not used to that at all. So that was like a major transition, and she just kind of was feeling frustrated. And we actually did talk about that of, why don't you just step away for 10 minutes? Odds are the world will not come crashing down, right? Knock on wood. Maybe it is 2020. Maybe I should be a little bit careful, but odds are in those 10 minutes where you're maybe away from your computer, those things will be there when you get back. And so the quality of your time investment. And again, it's like, okay, will those 10 minutes have been productive anyway? Maybe not. But if I spend those 10 minutes walking my dog or doing something else, you come back with just kind of a new focus and a new view.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes into number 5 as well, as I'm just tired, or I'm tired. And I know I feel that sometimes. I hear a lot of people say it as well. And I think when it comes to burnout, we have to be very honest with ourselves. And sometimes we've talked a lot about like the language or the internal thoughts we have. And I like to identify and kind of question myself, am I tired or am I bored? Like, am I bored and am in just a routine I don't want to be in, or am I tired? Like, because tired means I need sleep. Like, I need to prioritize my sleep. Bored is a little bit different, or and it's a lot with like working out. If I'm tired, I didn't get my workout in because I'm tired. A lot of times personally, I feel more energized after I get the workout done and I have energy throughout the rest of the day. So it's kind of identifying like, am I tired or do I just not want to do it?
Right.
Honest
Right.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say that's the hard conversation to have with yourself. But I do think, if addressing it in a way where there's no right answer, right? So maybe some days you are tired and it's like,
yes,
this is not going to happen for me today, and that's okay. But sometimes it's okay to kind of catch yourself and say, okay, I know that that's what I say when I really don't want to do something, or, I'm just kind of like in a rut or bored. And I think then the next step we take, that we maybe not often isn't like our default, is to take the answer, whatever the truthful answer is, and then give a specific solution for it. So if you are tired, we know the answer is sleep.
Yes.
If you're bored, get up from your desk, go do something different for a little bit,
Yeah.
And I think again, it's like we said earlier, when you take away that guilt, it allows you're more likely to answer honestly and then find a solution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many times that we feel, overworked or in a rut, and we're searching and kind of grasping for all these different ways, or maybe we just feel stuck and we don't do anything. So when we're identifying like, okay, I feel X, then I have these three options. I think that's perfect. I think that's a really good option.
Yeah. Yep. And two, I always come back to this phrase of the less you do, the less you want to do. And I don't know, when I heard that, I just thought of myself when I'm sitting on the couch, it's so hard to get up and do anything. Whereas if you're running around, it's like, okay, one more thing, I have to do the laundry, no big deal. Whereas if I'm sitting there doing nothing, it becomes this whole big thing. And so I think that's kind of an example of like a personal experience I've had of what is really going on, and identifying ways to kind of just do something different, even if it's just trying it out. I mean, I think the worst that can happen is that, okay, I know that solution doesn't work for me, but at least I, know that much, right?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Number 6, it's all about the positives. I feel like this is kind of a topic that I've heard a lot of people talk about here recently, and have kind of picked up on the fact of like, even like toxic positivity. I don't know. What are your thoughts about it all has to be positive?
Well, I think this is kind of where I would say this is where we can really challenge the narrative of burnout. I think over just being in kind of the wellness space, it's something that is it's almost like a hot button topic, or whatever that phrase is. But it's like, okay, well, we need to, people are tired because they're working at home or because things are really challenging right now. So let's just talk about all of these positive things that people can do. And I think that, the intention behind that is obviously very good of, here are some strategies to help bring more positivity to your day. But I think what I would challenge us in the industry, just kind of what in your, whatever your work setting is to just say, okay, that might work for some people. But does it really address the root cause of burnout? And I think we're a little bit afraid to talk about that sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. That root cause, and really digging a little bit deeper instead of giving like a superficial or Band-Aid to the problem. I think sometimes you have to ask those hard questions.
And as an employee,
and that's busting that myth. Yeah.
Right. I was going to say, as an employee, I think you can appreciate, when there's just some like realness, like just some acknowledgement of like, things are really hard right now.
Yeah.
And just period. That's the end of the conversation, or not conversation, but end of the sentence. And then the conversation becomes, how can we, obviously we want it to be a more positive experience. So how can we do that? It's like, we don't ask, how can we improve often enough. I think that's probably like one of the biggest keys if we really want to address, burnout in the workplace. It's like and there's nothing wrong, it exists everywhere, right? Like
there's nothing wrong. And the conversation, the conversation becomes more authentic. So like, if we're nervous to have the conversation to get down to the root cause, it's because we're scared there's going to be some outcome we don't like. But in all reality, it's going to be a more authentic, personal conversation where it's probably going to draw those people in closer and be like, I feel cared about and I feel comfortable and safe to have those conversations. Exactly. And feel like, okay, we're making some progress and my voice is heard, rather than, oh yeah, everything's a mess. Like, right. I'm getting out of here. That's the fear, but I don't feel like that's really what the reality of the outcome would be.
Yeah, I think the response would be so much more just appreciative of saying, okay, even if we don't get to a solution today, we're at least understanding all of the factors that may be contributing to what we're experiencing.
Exactly.
And that's the only point at which you can change something. If you just kind of go to a solution without understanding the problem, it's not going to work.
Right. And number 7 is big change is the only way. Mm-hmm. And that falls exactly into this of, maybe it's just having that conversation, and a small change or a small conversation has a much bigger impact than we probably realize. And we expect ourselves to say, okay, if I'm going to broach this topic, or if I'm going to kind of look at this issue, then I'm going to have to make a big change as a result. Right. And it becomes overwhelming and it becomes suffocating. So then we stand still and don't do anything. Mm-hmm. And it just goes to a lot of different aspects and realms of our life of, we feel so overwhelmed by the big changes and massive things we need to do that we don't take a step back to say, what are the small incremental things that I can do and that are in my control that I can do today? What can I do today to make myself one step, 1 inch closer to where I want to get?
Right. And I think it's, I catch myself having to remind myself to do that, even with like work projects of, okay, I know what I want to have at the end, but I have to break it down by step. And I think we kind of forget. It's like when we're dealing with a problem that's not so black and white, it's like we forget that process exists. It's like becomes this gray mess that it's just like I don't even know where to begin. But I always say too, like, even a small step is a step in the right direction. So let's just at least do something, like let's just try to do one small thing that's going to benefit me, that's going to help me avoid burnout. Or if I'm an employer, what can I do? One tiny thing I can do to kind of make the employee day-to-day experience more positive. Even if it seems small, odds are those are the things that people remember.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love what you said. Like, even if it's a step, it doesn't even have to be in a step in the right direction. Even if it's a step in the wrong direction and you learn from it, that's progress. Like, you then need to change course. So do something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think we want to do we talk about kind of these big issues that seem very, I don't know if existential is too like dramatic of a word, but it does seem like a very kind of big, impactful experience, burnout. And so like, we automatically want huge organizational change. But that doesn't work. We don't get there unless we start with the small stuff. So I think that's an important thing to understand. And then, so number 8 is, I don't want to be a burden. And this kind of is a culmination, I think, of a lot of what we've talked about, but, we've all been there, we have these feelings of burnout, of stress or anxiety. But it's like, I don't even want to, like, this is the moment where I would answer, I'm fine, right? Because I don't want to give it to someone else. I don't. Yeah. And I think that's just that. A lot of hesitation, and it just kind of breeds more negativity, more burnout, more exhaustion. It's almost like this like sad negative snowball.
Yes. Yes. No, I feel, and it's one of those things that with the word guilt that comes back in, it's like everybody has so much on their plate. I don't want to be a burden when I call my parents or my friend or whoever the case is to vent or complain or just need like someone to listen, because they've got kids, they've got stuff they're dealing with. It's almost like I don't reach out to those people that I probably should. And I want them to call me, like I want them to feel like I'm an outlet for them. If they have something they're going through, I want someone to be able to feel like they can lean on me and not feel like they're burdened. But that guilt comes in of like, but I feel that way towards other people. So I've forced myself to make the call, make the text, reach out and schedule those things or have those conversations. And oftentimes it's been received very well, as if like, yeah, I need a break. Let's schedule lunch. And I'm like,
right.
done. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think again, it's like we talked about at the beginning of flipping the narrative and how would you feel if someone came to you and said they didn't have capacity to do things? It's the same thing here of, if you called me and said, okay, I just need to talk through something really quick, I'm not going to be like, Allie again, like it's going to be like, okay, I'm glad that she feels like she can reach out to me. I think we've all experienced that. So you're not going to be met most likely with a response of like, sorry, I don't really want to talk to you about this or something. That's what we always, we use the term support system a lot, but we forget the true words in that definition, the support, right? So I think that there's always a way to just be honest and knowing that you're not alone. I think that's a huge thing to acknowledge, particularly this year, just with, it's easier to feel isolated. You have to be more intentional about reaching out now. Whereas, it might run into someone before, at the store or whatever it is and say, hey, let's catch up. Whereas now it's like, I'm not out and about as much. So I have to be intentional about, reaching out. And I feel good when people reach out to me. Right. So I think it goes both ways. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So number 9, it's out of my control.
Yeah, I think when we talked about this, it was kind of, let's give them a little bit of tough love was this one. Because there's so many things that there are a lot of things that are out of our control and happen for the moment or kind of throw us for a loop. But really, there are so many things in our control that we have the capacity and the ability and the time to put energy and resources in to make progress towards our own goals, to make us happier, to do the things. And I think of this a lot, like there are people out there in the world that are living a life that I want to live, like as far as they have, their energy is going in the right direction. They enjoy their job. They've got the work-life balance. And it's like, sometimes I fall into the trap of like, well, that's not for me, or I don't have time to do that. And it's kind of a tough love situation I have with myself to say like, no, like there are so many things you could be doing that's being done and you're giving yourself an excuse. So stop giving yourself an excuse.
Yeah.
And go do it.
Yeah. I always say there's a lot that we can't control, but what we can control is our response. And I think that has more of an effect than we realize on our day of just how we respond. And I think, with this one too, it is kind of giving yourself the tough love of saying, okay, I know that this is an excuse for something I'm not doing or wish I was doing. But at the same time, it's almost, viewing it in the more positive light instead of focusing on kind of what you're not doing. It's almost saying, okay, what can I control? Or how can I change my response to get the outcome that I want? So it's almost shifting to like an outcome focus. I don't know what the term would be there, but almost just focusing on here's where I want to go and rather than here's what I'm not doing. Like it gets better results, I think, that way.
Yes, definitely. And that leads us into the last one of I should be grateful. And so we kind of give you the tough love as number 9 and then we come around and kind of give you a hug to say, but number 10, I mean, we really do feel like, sometimes things are very hard and stress is very high. Anxiety is very high. And there's so many things going on in the world that we don't have control over, like on a large scale, that we feel extremely overwhelmed and we are burnt out. And a trap that we can fall into is things are hard for me, but I should be grateful because it's so much worse for X, Y, or Z. Or, at least I have a job. I know there's people that have been, furloughed or lost their job, or so many different things have happened, even just recently. But that doesn't discount your emotions. Yeah. Your experience. And sometimes you have to admit, I am struggling. And I need resources and help, and I need to pull on the people that love and care about me. And I need to be able to accept the fact that I'm not always I'm needy right now. I need some help and I need some I need somebody to help me not struggle as much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're so hard on ourselves. It's like we're our own toughest critics, and we forget that, we give empathy to others, but it's hard for us to give it to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest contributing factors to burnout, is to say, oh, but it could be so much worse. The statement is true. Even if that's
right.
objectively true, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel stress or anxiety or any kind of negative emotion, because we're human beings and we forget
right.
that sometimes, right? We're like, okay, and that's good. It's good to be, aware of the positives in your life and what to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, just as you're honest with acknowledging what you're grateful for, you have to acknowledge that part of living, part of life is to sometimes we just feel off. Like sometimes things are hard. And just because, hard means something different to each person. So we kind of have to take it, remember that it's all relative. And, while it's important to be grateful, it's also important to honor what you're truly feeling. Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to change. It's like stopping that cycle. Like so much of what we've talked about today is just changing the way we have internal conversations. And sometimes just acknowledging, just saying it is hard. And it's taking away the but, right? The but part of that sentence. It's hard, but just say it's hard. It's okay.
hard.
And just, that's fine.
And that reassurance of knowing life ebbs and flows. So when you're down, it's going to go back up. And when you're up, it's going to go down. And that is a normal occurrence. And sometimes it's an even flow and sometimes it's spiking all crazy. Right. But those things, you have to kind of expect. I'm going to have some good days. I'm going to have some bad days. I think the gist of our conversation, and to kind of wrap it up and sum it up, is to become more aware of the days that we're having and the internal dialogue that we're having with ourselves, to say, I want to be honest with myself so I can then find the right resources and choices to help myself on today. Not overwhelmed by the big picture, but what do I need today? What does my family need today? What can I do for others today? And just challenging some of those myths that we tell ourselves.
Yeah. And being okay with the product of those conversations, right, is the biggest, probably one of the hardest parts. But that kind of wraps up our conversation for today. So I think it was a great topic. We had fun discussing it. Hopefully, it resonates with folks. I think it's probably something that we all experience. And sometimes it's just pausing and taking the time to kind of dive deeper into those things. But next session, number 4 of the Light Your Fire campaign, will be empathy meets employee discipline, which I think is going to be a really great conversation. Those two things kind of seem at odds sometimes, but I think we're going to talk about, how did those interact, especially this year in 2020. So we hope you can join us. It was great to see you virtually, Allie, and too. Everyone else that joined us. And we will see you next time for session 4.
Great. Thanks, guys.